Before I start, a little about me. In advance of your question, I will say right away, I will be extremely vague in the details. If you've ever worked in cybersecurity or for the government, you'll understand why I'm so careful. I graduated from high school in the late 2000s, tried to go to college, but it didn't work out, and then I joined the Army. I still plan to serve after receiving my diploma. Entered the Marine Corps during basic training and qualified for the Special Purpose Training Unit. And after completing it, he signed up for training to become a Navy SEAL. It didn't work out. It was very tough bullshit, but it's okay because I went to SWCC and became a member of a special small combat vessel crew unit. The SWCC squad are the same guys from the movies who always arrive on time with fast boats and loot pods with everything they have to get our guys out of hell. Sometimes they work with helicopter crews or fly helicopters themselves. Most of the time they just patrol the rivers in Iraq, praying that someone will shoot at them because they can go crazy with boredom. It sounds cooler than it actually was. Besides becoming an expert on all types of small watercraft and also taking quite a few courses in diving and aerial work, I didn't get to do any of the cool SEAL stuff. Of course, there were some things I did as part of the SEAL group, but I don't think I can talk about them. I didn't knock down doors, blew anything up, didn't participate in any team operations, and only got into firefights a couple of times. By the way, most of the special forces from YouTube are former guys from the Navy SEALs, or special forces who are just pretending to be cool. Basically, their colleagues did all the dirty work, and they simply retell the stories on their own behalf so that someone else can tell them, without revealing the identities of the participants and other things. Basically, I retired from SWCC operations 8 years after my injury and spent the remaining 4 years of my 12 years of service doing other things in the Special Forces, more related to cybersecurity. I retired, got my VA card, went to college for a couple of semesters to get my cybersecurity certification, and have been working in the private sector since early 2019. I even have my own LLC. This story begins in early 2016. I had been in my hometown for some time, which was located near a large naval base. I changed my career path and was on a short medical leave after an injury. So I had time to reconnect with my old high school sweetheart, and we had been dating for several months. She was my best friend in high school, and I really screwed up when I missed the chance to ask her to go to prom with me. After I went to serve, we hardly saw each other and became very distant over the years. She gave birth to a child, a charming 3-year-old girl. There was no dad in her life, which was solely his loss because the baby was a real treasure. We quickly became close, and after a couple of months, this girl periodically called me daddy, which made my heart ache. As for her mother, even in my school years, I was crazy about her. And when we met again, these feelings flared up with renewed vigor. Everything started spinning at lightning speed. For the first couple of months, she and I were literally inseparable. We went on fun walks with her daughter, and after we put her to bed, we acted like anxious high school students. The rest of the time, we constantly corresponded at work, tagged each other in memes on social networks, and so on. In general, all this stupid, sweet, romantic bullshit that is embarrassing to remember when you are already over 30. But we were truly in love. I had never experienced love like that before. I'd been shot, I'd been stabbed. Hell, I'd had my leg pierced by a 7.62, but none of that scared or bothered me more than the feelings I had for her. In short, I really got into trouble. However, there was one problem in the person of her brother, a lanky pseudo-gangster who was also white as snow. This omitted, unfortunately, was also the baby's godfather, her uncle by blood. He was nothing to her, he was just a former drug addict who worked at the same Target as my girlfriend. Once he passed out right in the store, allegedly from low sugar. In fact, he was just coming down from another dose, and my girlfriend bought him a burger and soda. And in a drug culture, this is equivalent to being handed a bag of gold. From then on, he considered himself indebted to her and became her right hand. Luckily, he never saw her as a romantic interest. He was content with garbage from the same trash heap from which he himself had come out. Thank you, Lord. She called him brother, and he called her sister. So, automatically, this dick became an uncle for the baby. He showed up in the middle of the night during our relationship. This was a very bad sign for me because this homeless, now unemployed, worthless idiot moved in with her. Our friendly acquaintance started extremely badly. He simultaneously met me and my .45 caliber, displayed right in front of his nose. This was the moment when I was trying to figure out what the hell a grown man was doing in my girlfriend's apartment. We were sleeping, and I heard something rattling in the other room. Especially for the curious. The child slept between us. There were no animals in the apartment, so I knew for sure that any source of noise was not someone in the room, but a stranger who shouldn't be there. Add to this the recent break-ins at her apartment complex, and you will understand that I was armed for good reason. I didn't live there. I had my own studio not far from the base. I just often stayed overnight because it was convenient and cool. And given the recent break-ins, she and the child were calmer when I was nearby. So it was a win-win for everyone. Naturally, I had no say in whether he would live there or not. In an attempt to smooth things over after I poked this brat in the nose with the barrel of a 1911, I lent him my PlayStation 3 and a spare TV to give him something to do. Because why the hell would he go look for a job? Instead, he spent his days smoking weed on the balcony and playing Need for Speed and Call of Duty on my console. This omitted acted as if my girlfriend was his mother. He expected her to come home from work and cook his food, take out and fold his washed clothes. God, one time he even asked her if she could relace his sneakers because she was better at it. This kid, he was 23, was a complete loser. Apart from the fact that he was babysitting a real child, while my girlfriend and I were at work, my vacation was already over, he was of no use. We came home and the kitchen was a mess. His things were lying all over the apartment. He regularly left gifts in the toilet and didn't even bother to flush. Also, fuck him for asking my girlfriend to wash his clothes, because when I had to flush it, I didn't always see floating toilet paper in the push. I guarantee this asshole was always itching his dirty ass. Nevertheless, I must admit, he got along with the child. Her diaper was never dirty until she switched to the potty. So at least thank him for that. At least the guy was somewhat useful. This continued for another 4 months. I spent so much time with the girl that she and I began to discuss the possibility of renting an apartment together so as not to pay for 2 rents. And of course, this guy started bombarding us with questions about the extra room. Because of which we constantly had disputes and quarrels. Because 4 months after moving, this omitted still could not find a job. The guy who talked so much about what a successful huckster he was in his late teens couldn't even push legal weed. He claimed to be a professional drifter, but in the few times I trusted him to park my car, he nearly hit a pole 4 times. And every time he and I had arguments or even small skirmishes, his catchphrase was, "I'll force it on you now, and if I can't handle it myself, I have a bunch of friends who definitely can." I want to emphasize again, I was not a Navy SEAL. I did not go through the brutal combat training that you Navy give to special forces and team members. Yes, I learned something, enough to qualify for the special forces. But the hell that the SEALs go through in underwater training, their additional training schools, individual programs, and what they now do as part of the covert operations of JSOC and other agencies, all of this passed me by. We drive boats, fly helicopters, jump from planes. Sometimes we work together with team forces, but more often these are operations with allied forces or escort in some territorial waters where we should not be. Plus, I was still injured. By that time, I could walk on both legs, but if the pills didn't work or the weather was bad, I had to lean on something because I just couldn't stand upright. However, overall my body was fine. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the Navy and learned Kali and Silat with guys from the Philippines I met on base. They are the reason I fell in love with lumpies so much. I have mastered various shooting stances like the central axis relock and completed CQB course due to my service in the Navy. Yes, I wasn't a MARSOC, but I wasn't a pathetic screw-up either. With my bare hands without any 1911, but I loved his sister. I wanted to marry her and adopt her child. So I just bit my tongue when he came at me. Time passed, and from time to time he lashed out at me for various reasons. Eventually I got tired of it, and one evening when I was getting ready to go home, I took my PlayStation 3 and TV with me. This really hurt him. The guy announced that from now on, the door to this apartment was closed to me. To which my girlfriend reminded me that this is her apartment, her rules, and that he should behave respectfully. And then that morning came. About a week after that, I stayed with a girl for the night. She and I got up early because I had to go to the base and she had to go to work. We left the apartment with the baby, began to buckle her into the car seat, and then I realized that I forgot my wallet inside. He returned after him, was already heading back to the exit, when this asshole suddenly says, "Will you wash the dishes when you get back?" This dish was the same one he'd messed up the night before when he'd gotten high and made himself some mac and cheese. And somehow, to do this, he needed a kneading bowl and 4 different wooden spoons. I looked at the sink, then at him, then back at the sink, and then back at him and said, "You omitted, stoned, wash it yourself, and never dare to tell me again." Then he turned on his heels, as clearly as possible for a man who had run out of painkillers, who was full of pain and anger, and walked out the door. I managed to go down 6 or 7 steps when suddenly I heard the door swing open behind me with a roar. I turned around and saw this dick rushing towards me with his arms outstretched. And before I could even react, he pushed me down the stairs. I fell onto my back. All the air was knocked out of my lungs. The back of my head hit the concrete platform with all its might, and a new wave of pain flared up in my leg. And then he jumped on top of me. This omitted brought me back to consciousness, and I immediately went to work. Through the pain, I began to get out from under him, and as soon as I was on top, I began to knead his fists with my fists. I broke his lips, stabbed him in the eye, in the temple, and even lightly poked him in the Adam's apple. I was furious. At that moment, I absolutely didn't give a damn whether he would survive or not. Someone had to die, and that someone definitely wasn't me. But my girlfriend saved his life the second time. She began to worry why I had been gone for so long, and when she heard screams, she ran downstairs and found me on top of him, beating him. She screamed at me to stop immediately, and I did. As soon as I stood up, he immediately started pouring out of his mouth. "Sister, he threatened to kill me. He attacked me and threw me down the stairs because I just asked for the console back." She knew it was a complete omitted. The neighbor's surveillance camera recorded everything. But at that moment, she was furious, completely justified. I took her to work, took the baby to kindergarten, and went to the base. I had to explain to my commander why my knuckles were bloody and why I was applying an ice pack to the back of my head. They offered to call the police so I could file a report. I refused. The commander almost ordered me to do this, otherwise he would send me back on medical leave. Although technically he had no right to do so, I replied that I would rather go on vacation again than lose my girlfriend by calling the cops on her brother. The commander made it very clear that I was still omitted, and that someday this would backfire on me. Well, he was right. Basically, her brother gave her an ultimatum. Either she breaks up with me or he leaves and disappears from her life and the life of her daughter. And to be completely honest, this parasite had been the only constant male figure in her baby's life since birth. This would be a real tragedy for the child, and she wanted to protect her from such pain, which means I got caught up in the distribution. Honestly, I would rather have had an axe stuck in my heart, because what I felt was much worse. It's one thing to say goodbye to the woman you love, but to say goodbye to a sobbing child whom you wholeheartedly wanted to adopt and make your own. I wouldn't want to meet a person who would be able to hold back tears at such a moment. Because people like that scare me. I went back to my apartment, packed up the box of toys, memorabilia, and clothes they had left with me, and waited for the right moment to drop it off at my ex's work. I was broken. But this little omitted wanted to finish me off while I was lying at the bottom. Remember those friends he was talking about? So, he didn't lie. He really had friends with criminal records and shitty intentions, and in the months that followed our separation, he put them to use. One morning I woke up to find that my car had been placed on concrete bricks. The wheels had been removed, the catalytic converter had been cut out, the windows had been broken, and insults and swastikas had been spray painted on the body. I wasn't a Jew. I'd been roasting his sister for the last 6 months, but somehow I still ended up being a kike and a faggot. Insurance didn't cover everything, and I had to shell out $2,500 for repairs. The police arrived and drew up a report, But the recordings from the cameras were useless. Their faces were covered, gloves were on their hands. And this is not CSI. No one will collect hairs from the asphalt to find criminals, since it ended in simple vandalism. 2 weeks later, the same ghouls attempted arson. Someone in a mask and hoodie lit a Molotov cocktail and threw it on the rug in front of my front door. If the fire protection system in the apartment had not suddenly worked, I would have had to jump from the third-floor balcony because the fire would have engulfed the entire entrance. This was already a serious crime. The cops became very interested in the investigation, but again, there were no leads. The face was covered, there were no prints, the cameras didn't really record anything, and so on. Then there was silence for a month. My ex texted me when she found out about the arson. I said that I knew for sure that it was her brother, but I had no proof. She promised to talk to him, and what a coincidence. The attack stopped, at least until the cops took an interest in the bastard. Naturally, I mentioned his name as a possible suspect. During this month, she literally forced him to find a job, giving him an ultimatum, threatening to throw him the hell out, and so he got a part-time job in a rundown cafe. So this place was perfect for this piece of shit. He worked there until the cops came to him. When the owners saw that the police were asking questions of their new employee who had only been with them for a week or two, they chased him down, which he was clearly grateful for. And then one evening I was returning home after work. I went to the gym, worked up a good sweat there, and then grabbed something to eat at the supermarket. Moreover, I arrived at the house in a fucking rental car from Enterprise because my car was still being repaired. Let me quickly clarify something. Even though I was already over 21 and had gun ownership documents plus a concealed carry permit, I did not bring a gun to the base. It was an extremely rare exception that anyone other than employees of certain services was allowed to carry a gun at all times. I did not leave the gun in the car at the base. There was no place to safely store the weapon. So I just didn't take it with me. That's why when this omitted attacked me in the morning, I didn't have it. I was unarmed. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, there was a 4th one above me, and between them there was a staircase. I heard quick footsteps coming down from above. 4 in masks, hoods, and gloves were moving straight towards me. My door was already open. I threw the grocery bags and tried to slam the door behind me. They managed to stick their leg in and, piling on them, broke into my apartment. Everything that happened next happened in 14 seconds. The neighbor across the street installed a surveillance camera at his door after the fire incident, so we know the exact timestamps down to the second. I had a loaded pistol in the closet next to the front door. Yes, irresponsible, I know, but then I was young and stupid. In a fight with the first one who broke into the apartment, I managed to reach the closet, feel for the pistol, and push back, increasing the distance between us. I remember this moment to the smallest detail. 4 men stood in the doorway and in the corridor. The first one, whom I had just thrown away, was caught from behind, preventing him from falling, and he moved towards me again. I raised the gun. It was a SIG P226 loaded with 40 Smith & Wesson. As soon as I heard someone scream, I began to aim the barrel and pull the trigger. I didn't aim for the legs. I didn't shoot to scare. I wasn't trying to go off on a tangent. Frame, head, as taught. How they trained? The first one collapsed. The second received 2 bullets that went through the first. After which I sent the final shot into his forehead. The third froze in place until 4 bullets entered his chest. The fourth turned around and was already halfway through the door when I fired the rest of the clip at him, shooting him through the body of the third. You might think, wait, the fourth one ran away. That's murder. You're a murderer. But the police decided otherwise. The investigators also did not bring any charges against me because he survived. But the first 3 who received high-speed sleeping pills did not. The brains of the first literally scattered across the second, and the brains of the second were smeared on my wall. I pierced the third one right through, the heart, lungs, and everything into the meat. He died on the spot. The fourth was my ex's brother. Of the 3 bullets that hit him, 1 only slightly scratched his butt, another lodged firmly in his right buttock, and the third hit him squarely in the spine, approximately in the area of the kidneys. The vertebrae are crushed, the spinal cord is destroyed. His illustrious career in breakdancing and cycling competitions ended once and for all. The man was paralyzed from the waist down, a permanent catheter for urine, a diaper for everything else. The only useful product he could now produce. He'll never be able to walk again. He'll never be able to fuck. And when his condition stabilized enough that he could be discharged from the hospital, he was sent not home, but to prison. 3 charges of manslaughter. He was held responsible for the death of his friends, plus charges of conspiracy to murder, assault, battery, and even endangering others, since, according to the law, it was he who was charged with the risk of me shooting in an apartment complex. He will never breathe the smell of freedom again. I would like to say that after that everything ended like in a fairy tale, that my ex returned to me, that we got married, that I adopted her baby, and that we later had 2 more of our own. But no. Less than a day later, she said that she was afraid of me, that she didn't want me to get close to her or her child, that she would call the police if I appeared near her home or work. Here is omitted, but I liked that target. She called me a murderer and accused me of setting the cops on him to provoke a backlash and give him a reason to shoot him. I completely ignored the arson, the vandalism, and all the threats that he had been throwing at me for months. I didn't see her again. She blocked me everywhere, her family too. I changed my number, transferred to another target, and a couple of months later moved to another part of the city. 8 years have passed since then. I never heard a word from her. I know she's alive. Through friends, I was told that in 2020 she got married, gave birth to a second child, and seems to be happy. Well, so be it. I never got my happy ending, my little white picket fence. Believe it or not, killing 3 people, even if you're trained to fight and prepared for the fact that you might have to do it one day, hits you hard in the head. Especially when this happens not in Baghdad or Abbottabad, but at your home. There's a huge mental and emotional difference between killing for work and killing because your life hung in the balance. I suffered from PTSD for a year. I couldn't touch the weapon even when it was returned to me. The Navy treated everything with understanding. They contributed to the investigation, including the same commander who called me a cretin. He testified about the morning I was attacked. I was offered to live at the base under guard until the situation calmed down, but I refused. 8 years have passed since then. I retired and work in the private sector. I have my own LLC. I make great money doing hypersecurity and facility security consulting. Sometimes I go out to sea on a boat. My woman of 3 years is the most loving and supportive person I have ever met. I know that if anyone tries to kill me again, she will stand by me like a mountain. We are discussing with her when we should have children, talking about how we need to do this while we are not too old. Life is good. But you know what really warmed my heart? Just the other day, I received an alert from Google that I set up 8 years ago. It contained the drug dealer's first and last name, and next to it the word obituary. It turns out that someone in prison is tired of listening to this asshole in a wheelchair, puffing out his cheeks and rubbing himself for his coolness, thinking that no one will touch him since he is a colleague. They broke his head with his own wheelchair and then they tortured him thoroughly. He was a bright and charming guy who fell on hard times in his adult life and ended up in prison. What surprised me most was that it turned out he had a daughter. None of us knew about it then. She was, of course, unlucky, but I doubt that she even had time to recognize her biological sperm donor, and frankly, it's even for the better. So, yeah, sorry for dumping this fucking novel on you, but I didn't want to leave out important details. I hope you enjoyed my story. Thank you very much for watching. Write your nuclear revenge in the comments under the video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the most interesting stories from the threads. Hug.